Okay, my name is Eric Krieg, and as you folks know, we're with PhACT, the Philadelphia Association for Critical Thinking. We've been around for over 25 years, advocating science and reason and promoting that kind of stuff, and particularly giving a rational response to paranormal and fringe claims. We have these regular meetings that are on the third Saturday during the school year, starting at 2 o'clock. For the rest of the time in the spring, they'll just be online, which means we can get some more distant speakers rather than in person. Starting in the fall time, we'll have to see where we would be at that time. Among other things that we do are we have a substantial web page with a lot of neat information that gets a lot of hits, and we also have a yearly science fair contest that we participate in both the Bucks County. I'm going to try to get started with Montgomery County and Philadelphia, where we give prizes out to young students that show demonstrate critical thinking, which is critical in doing real science. So I particularly welcome all the meetup people that are here. And when I stop talking, Doreen will tell you about the Q&A procedure. Our next speaker will be in February, also on the third Saturday at 2 p.m. And that will be Adam Rubin, and he's a comedian and also, I believe, a microbiologist, and he'll be talking about cloning and the covering of science coverage and how science gets reflected in the media. So he should be a good, entertaining, informative speaker. I believe we also have Susan Gerbic, who founded the Guerrilla Skeptics and has helped Wiki actually get a lot better in the last 15 years. And we'll talk about how individual people can really have an outside voice affecting what millions of people's intellectual diet is. So that would be in March that we do that. So our speaker for today is Robert Palmer. He's done a lot of great stuff for us, like getting John Delancey, Star Trek's Q here, interviewing him. He has a podcast. He's been an engineer doing space kind of work. He's had over 60 articles published in Skeptical Inquirer. He's speaking today on his part of helping the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. Most people will remember Psychics Hit, but skeptics try to give a more complete look at how well they've done. But before he starts, I just wanted, before closing out, for Deriva to explain how Q&A would work. Go ahead, and that's it for me.
Okay, well, welcome to everyone for the Q&A, which will be after Rob finishes. Please put all your questions in the chat, and please lead with a Q or Q colon so that we can distinguish them from other chat. We appreciate it. Rob, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you for having me back, and thanks for the introduction. One correction, I do not have a podcast. That rumor may have originated because the first time I spoke live at PhACT, there was somebody from the school who was writing a paper on the talk, and luckily they sent me the paper before it was published because it said that I ran the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. So I didn't want that out there in case any one of the rogues thought I actually said that. I didn't say that. I said I found skepticism when I found the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. So no, I don't have a podcast. All right, let me share my screen. And I am not going to be looking at the chat, but if the PhACT moderators have a question that's pertinent to what I'm saying at a particular point, maybe we don't have to wait to the end. I'll leave that up to them. And let's go full screen on this. So can everyone see that without any obscuring tiles? Because on mine, there are some tiles obscuring it.
Yes, looks good.
Okay. Let me hide my meeting controls. Okay, so when I named this, mine the GAPPP, because of the acronym for the project, people I spoke to in America didn't know what that was, apparently, but that's a UK thing and therefore likely an Australian thing. Mind the gap instead of watch your step. Anyway, this is the inside story of the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, so named by Richard Saunders.
The psychics offer wonder and endless possibilities in a world that often seems difficult and mundane.
Rob, I don't think we're seeing the video. Just audio?
Life.
There's no video.
But if you examine the record, it's not the psychics, but the hard-nosed scientists who have actually delivered the things that improve human life.
So that was just an audio check. There was no video there. So most people might have recognized the voice. Type it into the chat. First one wins. And the point there being made was, science has the goods and psychics are just full of it. But as a good skeptic, we want to see if that's true. So that's what the intent of this project was. Can psychics who predict the future actually deliver the goods? So this is what I'm going to be talking about. What was this project? Be talking about how we collected data, the scoring process, the results first overall, and then I'll give you some specifics. What was not predicted that should have been, perhaps? They always say they didn't see it coming. I'll be talking a little bit about how we publicized it after it was over. And then I'm going to go beyond talking about the Australian Psychic Prediction Project. I want to talk about why people believe this stuff and what's the harm in believing this stuff. And then I'll give you some closing thoughts. So that's the agenda for today. So the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, we had a goal of gathering and reviewing enough data to be able to draw a conclusion which would be valid as to whether individuals really do possess the ability by psychic or other means, and we'll talk about that in a minute, to be able to reliably foresee future events, right? There's often psychics who publish stuff in some newspaper, magazine in late December, early January for the predictions of the year. But the thing is, occasionally local groups will look at that and make comments on it, but no one's done a large-scale study. So we believe this is, in fact, the first one of those types. So it was created and managed by Richard Saunders, who's a former president of the Australian Skeptics, who produces the Skeptic Zone podcast. By the way, I have a pop-up on my screen for someone entering the room. Is that obscuring it now? Eric?
All good. I think we're okay.
Okay, so I was a member of this team, and I'm going to give you an insider perspective of this unique investigation. So it ran for about 12 years. It was completed in 21, and the numbers are 3,811 psychic or otherwise paranormal predictions were what we looked at. And the number of people who made that in our database was 207. So they were all from Australia. That's how it was limited. The majority of these people claimed psychic powers, but as I mentioned before, not all the predictions are psychic. We lumped it all together for simplicity, but the data set includes predictions about the future attributed to, mixed in with other pseudoscientific ideas like astrology, numerology, tea leaves, whatever. These people don't necessarily claim where they're getting the information, just that they can predict the future. So we called all the people psychics and the predictions psychic predictions. All of these were published in Australian media over a 21-year period. And we did not go into this, say, well, we're just going to prove these people wrong. Right? If the data showed that there was a significant number of people who are getting things right, this would have been big news. Maybe it was. So we believe this is the largest such effort ever undertaken because of the amount of data over the given time. So first part of this was the data collection. Over many years, Saunders, with some help, collected and archived predictions, starting with those available in print publications in Australia. Right, he went to the Psychics Directory, that's a thing, and then magazines and other print sources used later. These included documents that were stored at the State Library of New South Wales, State Library of Victoria. And then he also went and got predictions that were published by radio, TV, and YouTube. And it was a very labor-intensive process, took him thousands of hours. He realized it would take a large sustained effort to then score the huge number of predictions. So in 2016, he started with a team of Australian skeptics. They met in person. This was in the pre-days when there was no problem doing that. And they began the scoring. Then Saunders continued the effort over many years, mostly on his own. In mid-2020, with the support of Susan Gerbic, then an international team of volunteers was formed to complete this project. We met on weekly Zoom sessions. They were all run by Saunders. This was for well over a year, analyzing, assigning a score to every one of the predictions. One important part is that we scored these collectively. They weren't divvied up, so in no case was a scoring on a prediction one person's opinion. We worked collectively, and the actual number of predictions grew as we did this. And one reason for that is psychics will often say, I predict A, B, C, and D, and E. And that's listed as one thing initially because they got it from one location in one sentence or one paragraph. But as we worked on it, it was okay, it's separate predictions, and that actually grew the number of predictions in the database. The time spent by our team scoring these was on the order of 1,000 person hours. I just did a rough back of the envelope calculation on that. 42 continuous person days. As we met on Zoom, as I mentioned, and this was a typical screenshot. Richard Saunders is in top row, middle column. And we had a group of core people who were there almost every week, and other people would come in and out to help. So how did we score them? What did we use? We were able to mark something as either correct, wrong, unknown, expected, or too vague. So I'll be explaining the ones that aren't so clear there, like too vague and expected. So let me cut to the chase, since it's very important. The data showed that these people were actually very good at predicting future events. The vast majority of all the predictions were absolutely demonstrably correct. They avoided making predictions that were expected, too vague, or unfalsifiable. And on top of that, important events which would become historic were routinely predicted in advance. Virtually no big event in history was missed. So the evidence demonstrates that they are really psychic. And microphones are off, but in CSICon there was quite a bit of chuckling about that. So yes, that was not the results. So before I give you the actual results, let's go through the categories of things that aren't as easy as correct and wrong. So some predictions were impractical or impossible to verify. We categorize those as unknown. This could be spiritual, emotional predictions for people, maybe events dated a long time in the future. We haven't gotten there yet, so we don't know what the result is. Sometimes complex trend claims or statistical predictions that we really had no way to verify. Also, events unlikely to have been publicly acknowledged and recorded, like private lives of people, how they felt about things, that kind of a thing. So there were 79 of this type in the database. Here are some examples about the financial performance of Sharon Stone's investments. Every time I show a prediction in this presentation, by the way, in parentheses will be the name of the person who predicted it and the year it was predicted for. So and is not a typo, by the way. That's the name the person goes by. So, we couldn't figure this out unless we called Sharon Stone and got the contact information for her financial advisor from the early 2000s. That wasn't going to happen. There will be good airfares before Easter, some of the best prices in 15 years from 2014. Really didn't have a way to access that information. About the prime minister, I see him making his 90s. Well, he doesn't turn 90 till 28, so he hasn't died, so that's unknown at this point. Actress Sandra Bullock won't remarry until her 50s. Well, she's still in her 50s, hasn't married. We don't know if that's correct or not. And there's a lot of predictions in this database because being a Commonwealth country, the people are somewhat obsessed with the royal family. Here's one of them, William and Kate. William's going to outlive Kate and marry again. Well, we don't know if that's going to happen. By the way, there's some extraneous noise to the moderators on here, so somebody's not muted who should be. Expected. That's another category of these things that we couldn't mark either correct or wrong. Well, I'll change that. We could have marked it correct. And this is what the psychics do. They'll predict something that's just damn obvious going to happen, and you wouldn't have to be claimed to be a psychic to predict it. And then they say, see, I got that right. So this was a big thing. We didn't give them as correct, even if they came out correct. So many psychics make a large number of these type of predictions. They're either likely or absolutely going to happen. And this significantly reduced the percent scored correct, and we thought that was justifiable. There were 580 of this type in the database. Some examples: many children going missing over the next 2 years, like that never happens. And it was also vague. Sometimes it was kind of hard to decide if we should mark it vague or expected, like what is many children? Melbourne Cup. The winner is going to prove to be a young to middle-aged light brown or chestnut horse as opposed to a really old white hag. Yeah. Wild storms and brush fire, danger. And if there's not a location, they're talking about some general place in Australia, and that always happens in Australia. Another one of these generalities of things that happen all the time, large earthquakes in several parts of the world, in particularly in listing places that always get earthquakes. A major bank's going to have a severe cyber attack, okay, all the time. And, snowstorms in Germany, that never happens. So again, we mark these as expected. Here are some that we put as too vague. So this is another set of predictions that we couldn't really mark correct or wrong even, because they were just ambiguous. 698 of this type were in the database. Before the end of the year, we'll see a lot of underhanded things in politics and business. Okay, what is a lot? What counts as underhanded? Very vague. Upheavals and shocks in institutional and political life, vague. Then this weird one about George Bush and his father. Relations are going to be difficult. This could have been an unknown one. So again, unknown to vague and expected were somewhat overlapping, and we would often argue about where they went. A recent agreement with a man close to her, actress Elle Macpherson, will attract a breakthrough love-wise. Unsure whether the compatible issue. Again, that's vague. It's also really no way to check it. There was nothing we did Google it. There was nothing about her relationships in this regard in the public media. A visit to a coast by a celebrity couple, that's vague. Possibly involved with movies, possibly, maybe not. A global charity could appeal to Nicole Kidman. The prime minister challenging year in like half of the year. Joe Hildebrand spiritual year, being creative. This might have been put down to unknown. And this really weird one, unexpected objects falling to Earth. Some of us argued to put that as just wrong, but we just took it out of the calculation by saying it was vague. What's unexpected and how many? This really weird one about purple flowers and preventing brain bleeding. We couldn't find anything about that. Could have marked it as wrong. We didn't do that. We made too vague. There's a lot of astrology stuff. Here's one of the planet Uranus, an Aries sign, political conflicts, interest. This one's really good. As a universe, we respect money more. There'll be better and more efficient economy. Okay, we could have put that as wrong again, but it was vague. Who will win the U.S. election? This was from 2020. Numerology shows both Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden have a chance of winning. Wow, that might have been too expected too. But the really odd thing to me there is, they didn't mention what actually happened a few months after the election, which was almost overthrowing the government. So it is still up to the people to decide. That's interesting. So there's a whole category of predictions, which you can call 50-50 shots or coin flip predictions, right? Really, it could go either way. Maybe two teams are in the World Series and they predict who's going to win. Well, we actually did mark those correct or wrong. And those are treated equivalently to the more unlikely predictions. So I have to say that pushed the percent correct towards 50%, right? The more of those that are in the database, the higher the average correct score is going to be, inflating the success rate. Some examples: the Dragons will make it to the finals. Well, the odds were 8 of 15, almost 50-50 at the time that prediction was made. The ALF Grand Final, Greelong is to win. This was a 50-50 prediction. So, teasing all that, here are the results. Only 11% of predictions were scored as correct. And as I mentioned, this included a substantial number of coin flip predictions, pushing the number higher. Most predictions were either unknown, not a lot, expected, quite a few, too vague, or just plain wrong. Majority were just plain wrong. And here it is graphically for people who like it that way. So yeah, over half were wrong. And then if you count the expected and vague, which were kind of filler ones, and also a few for unknown, very little correct. So this chart I hadn't shown before. I actually just made it for this talk because I was wondering about this myself. What is the number of, not every psychic made the same number of predictions. So what is the max percent correct depending upon the number of predictions made, right? So on the horizontal axis, we look at 1. So if somebody is just logged with 1 prediction in the database and they got it right. So, all right, they had 100% right. But going, towards the middle, there were 50 who had, 50 predictions were made. Well, now you're down to a little bit over 30% right. And the higher you go, the most anybody had was a little under 250 predictions. And then you're under the 10%. And another way to look at that is predictions made versus the number of psychics making them. So the way you look at this on the horizontal axis is the 1 means, this is how many predictions, in this case, over 200, at least 1 psychic made, and that's the entire database. If you go into the middle, the number of psychics who made 50 predictions was down, maybe it looks like 25. And if you go to the far right, where someone made 250 predictions on a database, there was only 1 person that high. And this is a peek into how we saved the data, what we call our databases, Excel spreadsheet. So Richard originally had filled out the first several columns, year predicted by, where, topic, the main subject, and the prediction. And what we as a team did once I joined is we put the verdict, which was the category, and some notes. So we knew why we made a decision. In most cases, we did that. So let's look at the wrong prediction, since this was the overwhelming majority of our database. As I said, 53%. That was over 2,000 predictions were scored as just wrong. Some examples. The former prince, the king, and Camilla Parker Bowles would marry in 2000, 2001. Well, they got that wrong by several years. They did finally tie the knot in 2005, but that was wrong because they gave a time frame. Brad and Angelina said the relationship won't last beyond another year. That was made for 2007. Wrong. They went another decade. Sydney was going to be hit by a large earthquake. We're still waiting for that. Hopefully it won't happen, but it definitely did not happen in 2013. I love this one. Authorities will never catch Osama bin Laden because he's had plastic surgery and he's going to hide forever. No, he was killed 6 years after the prediction was made. Obama will fall from grace. Something to do with pork futures, farming, toasted ham sandwich. Well, we couldn't find any record of that in Google. Stevie Wonder. It must be great to wake up and see a prediction like that for yourself in a newspaper. But no. Terrorist attack in a major city. So after 9/11, pretty much every year they predicted there would be another terrorist attack. So when it does happen again, they're going to, whoa, see, I was right about this. But this prediction was wrong. And one of the most famous ones, Hillary Clinton will be the next president of the US. Everyone thought that. You think the psychics would have done better. And Joe Biden was going to be nominated but drop out before the election and Trump would win in 2020. Nope. And I love ones like this. these people don't understand physics at all. They make these bizarre predictions about things that are not possible, including using anti-gravity to lift heavy objects will become a reality instead of a dream. I was still waiting to be able to buy that on Amazon Prime, but I don't see it being advertised. So let's break it down to some subjects of interest. Since it's an Excel spreadsheet, we could filter and sort it all sorts of ways. So there were 26 predictions about the Queen that were made in the database. Only one was too vague or few expected, but 85% of them were just outright wrong. In fact, there were 12 predictions that she would abdicate or die in 2004, 2010, 3 psychics said that, 2012, 13, 14. I guess it's easy when a woman is getting old to keep predicting she's going to die this year. 2020. And in fact, yeah, they saw her retiring. I mean, that was close, but no cigar. So not a single prediction in the database about Queen Elizabeth II was correct. That's astounding. You know, not even just about a death, about anything she did. So they're either expected, vague, or just wrong. They were also interested in our former president for some reason. So there were 53 predictions about Trump being made from way before he was a politician to his presidency and afterwards. So we got 11%, which is right about on the average for everything, being correct. But 4 of those were 50-50 odds. 4 of the 5 were 50-50 odds. Some were too vague, not a lot. A lot were expected and wrong, 72%. This was before he was a politician even. Something about an earthquake damaging his building. Manhattan, no. Again, that Hillary would win the presidency in 2016. Donald Trump will not remain in power long and be trumped by either Hillary Clinton or Michelle Obama. I don't know how that was going to happen. And then we get the astrology built into it. Because he's a Gemini, according to his horoscope, and make a great president. A good president is charged exceptionally well on a positive note. I guess there are some people who might agree with that. We mark that as wrong. And also, this is clearly not understanding his personality at all, that he was going to resign out of the blue for no good reason, 2019 or 2020. Our database on number 45. And let's look at the other side of the aisle. 13 predictions about Hillary Clinton were made 2005 to 2020. Only 1 was correct, and 2 were expected, and 77% wrong. United States likely to have a female president, be either Condoleezza Rice or Hillary Clinton. Despite the latest results for Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton win the Democratic presidential nomination. And Hillary Clinton, there's no doubt about it, should be the first female president of the U.S. But to be clear, by the way, that last one was from 2008. First female president of the U.S., again, for 2008. Should definitely take over. She'll be loved a lot. Neither case is correct. Hillary will be the next president. Very clear. 2016, no. And then, as I mentioned before, there's an overlap from the Trump one. But, you know, he's going to just leave and Hillary Clinton's going to take over, or Michelle Obama. Again, database, expected, wrong, 1 correct. Even the correct one is a little bizarre. More women in general are set to rise politically and become world leaders. Hillary is one who will lead the way, with New Zealand also electing a female prime minister in the near future. So that last part was the thing that happened. We could have split this up into several ones. For some reason, we just gave it correct on that one. Natural disasters. This is a thing these people love to predict. 232 the whole time of the project, 2000, 2020. 5% only were correct. Too vague. Expected is really high. And wrong, again, over half, just pretty much matching the average of the whole database. So we were going to get a severe cyclone, meaning Australia, but someone has diverted it, so we won't suffer a direct hit. Again, something not understanding physics. A bad earthquake in Israel didn't happen. Major catastrophes in several areas, none of those things happened. Volcanic eruption, Indian subcontinent, largest on record, nope. Sometimes it seems they throw out these wild predictions, either because they believe them or on the chance it happens to happen, they'll say, look, I got this really rare thing correct. And then this thing about Planet X and Nibiru approaching the solar system, and yeah, okay, no. Pacific Islands will go completely underwater, maybe someday, but not yet. Sydney, I mentioned this one and the other one, large earthquake for Sydney, didn't happen, hasn't happened. Large earthquake in 2019 in Los Angeles. We get a lot of little ones all the time, but no. A large volcanic eruption mid-year. It is a volcanic set of islands, so could have happened, but it didn't. Tsunami warning, east coast of Australia, and a large earthquake. No. I don't even understand the 7 hills of Rome would be flattened. Large solar flares impact the US, interfere with electricity supply. I guess that could have happened, but didn't. And eclipses causing natural disasters. Well, there's another one of lack of understanding of anything about physics. Eclipses don't do stuff. And let me talk about one of my favorite categories, since I used to be an aerospace engineer. 13 predictions about space made for almost the entire length of our data. None of them are correct. Some were expected and too vague, and a whopping close to 70% were just wrong. Free energy drawn from empty space via device harnessing magnetic fields. Okay. This is just could have happened, but it didn't. 2019 International Space Station, a gas leak causing sickness. Putin has new, hypersonic nuclear missile actually putting up into space. Well, I guess if that happened, we could say unknown because it would be a secret program, but don't think that happened. And this is just weird. USA rushed to make space nations to own a bit of space. What? Very, very. So not a lot of predictions, but an interesting set. Okay, so maybe as important as what they got wrong and didn't get right is what they actually didn't even predict, and they didn't see it coming. So when looking back and scoring their own predictions to rate their success, these people do not mention the historic impactful events which they didn't see coming. And what we did is we went through every one of the years we had predictions for and pulled out 10 in each year. And I'm just going to give you a small sample of them here. Because if, sometimes the absence of evidence is evidence of absence. I mean, if these people can predict what someone's going to want for lunch the next day, you'd think these big things would have resonated in the psychic sphere. So 2000, historic stalemate in the presidential election. The Supreme Court decides the winner of the presidency for the first time. Australia, where all these people are set, worst drought in a century, not mentioned. The Space Shuttle Columbia's destruction on permanent re-entry, never happened before that we lost astronauts in such a fashion. The huge Indian Ocean tsunami earthquake that killed 250,000 people in 14 countries. One of the deadliest natural disasters in human history, and apparently sent no shockwaves through the psychic realm. 4 coordinated suicide bombings hit central London, going up to 2006. The unexpected death of Steve Irwin by a freak accident, the Australian beloved wildlife expert. I threw this one in there. I said, hey, iPhone revolutionized personal technology. They didn't see that coming. Adelaide experienced a national record heat wave, and another unexpected death, Michael Jackson at the age of 50. Another natural disaster they missed. This is largest in recorded history. And the famous tsunami and nuclear disaster caused by it, Fukushima, not seen by a psychic. In the US at the time, our biggest mass shooting, the Sandy Hook school shootings. And yes, they do predict events in America, even though they're based in Australia. The deadliest structural failure in history in Bangladesh. The widely talked about Malaysian Airlines flight 370, which disappeared. once in a century storm hitting Sydney, the science announcement of maybe a decade that water was found on Mars. Also, another one, first observation of gravity waves. They're always talking about these kinds of things. Didn't get that. And a political one. Obama visited Cuba, the first time a sitting president did since 28. One more set. First known interstellar object detected passing through the solar system. None of them saw it. France had a horrible series of civil unrests. A fire engulfed Notre Dame. And of course, the global pandemic began, which of course also caused the Dow Jones Industrial Average to suffer the largest point drop in history. And the actual death of the Queen, no one got it right. So the summary is that these people were actually appallingly bad at predicting future events. As Richard Saunders put it, most of what was predicted did not happen, and most of what happened was not predicted. So let me give you a little statement of the closing of the part of this presentation on this project from the man himself. Here's Richard talking about it when he addressed the Bay Area skeptics.
What we've discovered in many hours of pouring through these predictions, if you want to be a successful psychic in the prediction game, make many predictions. Make as many as you possibly can churn out, and keep most of them vague and ethereal, and then sprinkle those with some very precise predictions. And when occasionally your very precise predictions come true, which they must if you make a lot of them, if you make a lot of predictions in general, then that's the ones you point out and you say, I predicted this would happen. And all the other ones are forgotten, especially by the media, because the story is this psychic got it right. That's all they're interested in.
So I think that's a really good summary. So after we released the report, and I had something going on my screen, so I'm going to share that again. Okay, is that clear? I had to pop up on my screen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then we publicized it out to the world. And actually, before we were done, Adrian Hill hit the ground running and published a progress report in The Skeptic. Not for profit. I like that name. So it was the first report on what we were doing. And as I showed you, Richard gave a talk to the Bay Area skeptics late in 2021. The final report was published by Richard in The Skeptic, also in late 2021, the December edition. And then he published an additional article, also in The Skeptic. Also, articles about this project were published by me in the Skeptical Inquirer, both online and in the print magazine. And it was translated and published by Pensar for our Spanish-speaking friends. And following the report, Richard, as well as the executive officer of the Australian Skeptics, Tim Mendham, were interviewed numerous times in the Australian media, print and radio regarding the results. GAPPP was also the topic of the March episode of The Thinking Atheist, with Richard and me being interviewed by Seth Andrews. And I was happy we got that because it's somewhat preaching outside the normal skeptic choir to the maybe humanist groups. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why do believers think psychics are accurate, even though the kind of thing we showed you is the truth? Well, the media promotes people with these claims as the real deal, right? They rarely fact check the predictions afterwards, unlike what we did in this project. And here is just one example from a montage from daytime television.
My next guest started communicating with the dead when she was just a toddler.
She's a wife and a mom who also happens to talk to dead people.
Please welcome celebrity pet psychic. Our next guest is a clairvoyant to the stars.
We're back with a group of friends who share a very unique bond. They are all psychic.
Yes, Dr. Oz, almost senator from Pennsylvania. So every cable station seems to have their own darling, the Long Island Medium, and there's Tyler Henry, and there's Thomas John, who's been on 2 different networks with 2 different shows. So, that's just in people's heads. And then you can't go out of your house practically without seeing something like this plastered in a store, in a window. I was actually driving to work one day, and I stopped and took this picture, which really bugged me. A local town was having a psychic fair to raise money for the school, thereby exposing all the students there to the fact that, the people who run the school think psychics are legit. So besides all of that, the psychics, publicly talk about their own work, and they ignore their wrong predictions, and they go to great lengths to make the track record look better than it is. They, as we saw, make many predictions for expected events, and they count those as correct, and that obfuscates the situation, right? They take credit for vague predictions, retroactively saying they got it right, further increasing their perception of accuracy of their own work. And they ignore the ones they didn't see coming. And they also, quite amazingly, count the wrong predictions as correct. I mean, that sounds like, really? How could they do that? Well, here's one example. Kerry Calkins, who's in our database quite a bit, she publishes her own website, of course, and this is a snapshot. She has this little check mark, correct prediction so far. And here's her list of predictions, a partial list, much longer than this, for 2001. And she's got her little check marks and all these things that she says she got right. And I don't want you to read all of this, but look at the last 2. The one I told you about getting free energy from space and using anti-gravity to lift heavy objects. Those were hers, and she marked them, and she got those right. It's just amazing. So another subtopic of all this is, why does this matter? Who cares? Right? Well, some people think that nobody believes in psychics. I've actually had that response from editors on Wikipedia. Like, why do we need to push back on this? Everyone knows they're fake. Well, no. This is a Pew Research poll from not too long ago. So all U.S. adults, 41%, getting near to half, at least will admit that they believe in psychics. This broke it down by different Christian religions. And also, interestingly, agnostic and unaffiliated, nothing in particular. What surprised me there is people who would self-identify as atheists, still 10% of them believe. But the worst part is people who aren't in a mainstream Christian religion anyway, are nothing in particular, 52%. That's higher than the average, over half. And of course, because of this, and these people make a ton of money. This is the announcement from the American Federation of Certified Psychics and Mediums, which they're certified, so they're legit. The average psychic who is in their federation makes that amount of money, and this is going back a little bit. Might be some inflation tacked onto that now. Reasonably successful, $500,000. And those people you see on TV, like I just showed pictures, 5 million plus. Please don't take this as career advice, people. The amount earned by psychic mediums who have scammed clients, and this was a 1-year period, this is the estimate of the American Federation of Certified Psychics and Mediums. I would guess that is the tip of the iceberg. And by scam, they don't just mean, sitting down for a reading and paying them $100. They think that's legit. They mean outright, fraud of stealing money from them. I came across this data also from the organization. I found it very fascinating. It definitely shows a gender bias in that women are much more likely to spend a large amount of money. Well, any money at all is the 6-to-1 gender ratio. But if you go up to a large amount of money, $10,000 a year spending on psychics, it's almost 1,000-to-1 gender ratio. So in general, that's just true. So I wrote an article when I first got involved with talking about psychic scammers, and you could look this up in Skeptical Inquirer or just Google Rob Palmer and the name of the article there. It really talks about the serious harm that has come to people, especially financially, who have lost their life savings. And this happens more than you know about. Only the giant numbers, people who lose millions of dollars, get reported in the media, but not the people who lose their life savings of, tens of thousands of dollars. And that happens all the time. So let me give you some closing thoughts on the project and what we found out. The appalling record uncovered by our analysis of this large set of predictions, combined with the failure to predict the over 200 historic items of the time period of a study, should be embarrassing to people claiming clairvoyance. And it's almost like none of these people is actually psychic. Maybe no one. As a card-carrying skeptic, and yes, I do have a card, I need to say that maybe someone is actually psychic out there for which we did not have data. But no one has ever proved they can do this. Psychic, mediumship, paranormal claims have been investigated and never found to be authentic by unbiased researchers. And I'm not talking about parapsychologists who are out to prove it. It includes Harry Houdini, James Randi, and yes, Susan Gerbic of late. Besides the now defunct $1 million paranormal prize, there are 25 other prizes or more to be won totaling over $1 million that have never been claimed. The Center for Inquiry, for who I write for, Investigations Group, currently has the largest prize, $250,000. And hey, if you refer somebody and they win, you get $5,000 yourself. So that list, by the way, is available for anyone to see. A list of prizes of evidence of the paranormal. That's what it's called. And I took a screenshot of the webpage of CSIIG's $250 challenge. It says what the rules are and is easy as anything to apply. So finally, I put the question to OpenAI's ChatGPT. I don't know if anyone else has been playing with it, but it's quite fascinating. And I asked it, do psychics accurately predict the future? And within about a minute, this is what it came back with.
There is no scientific evidence to support the claim that psychics can accurately predict the future. Studies on psychic abilities, including those conducted by skeptics organizations, have consistently failed to provide any reliable evidence for the existence or accuracy of psychic abilities. Many supposed examples of psychic predictions can be explained by chance or other factors such as the power of suggestion and confirmation bias. For example, a psychic may make a general prediction that could apply to many people, and when it comes true, people may attribute it to the psychic's ability, when it could have been just a coincidence. Additionally, many psychics rely on cold reading techniques, where they use general statements and make educated guesses about the person they are reading, and use subtle cues from the person to make their predictions appear more accurate. Also, psychics often claim to be able to predict specific events, such as the outcome of a sports game or the stock market, but their predictions are often no more accurate than chance. Studies have shown that even self-proclaimed psychics who claim to have high accuracy rates are no more accurate than chance. In conclusion, there is no scientific evidence to support the claim that psychics can accurately predict the future. The majority of psychic predictions are not accurate and can be explained by chance.
Rob, I'm not sure if your audio is on.
Thank you. Yes, I clicked that off. So the last bit I said was, let me go back. So yeah, this is the set of people who were supporting the project, and this was included in the Skeptic report by Richard Saunders. So I thought I would include it here. And I think at least 2 of these people are in the chat. I haven't looked at it in 45 minutes, but I saw Adrian and Ben Radford. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. That was wonderful. So please feel free also to put your web link into the chat. I have a bunch of questions that have already been asked. And so I'm going to start with them, but I know that some people in the chat were discussing a couple slides. So I'm going to start with the stated questions, and then maybe we can go back and look at their question on a specific slide.
Sure.
And then I also have a couple questions at the end, if time permits. So the first one, have you ever seen an actual headline of psychic wins lottery?
No, I personally have not. And what they will say when, they get annoyed when people who are somewhat skeptical ask them, why don't you just win the lottery? And their favorite phrase is, it doesn't work that way.
Excellent. In one slide, you showed a psychic with one prediction who got it right. In other words, 100%. But the next slide showed hundreds with one prediction. Can you clarify?
Oh, I'd have to go back to the presentation. Let's do that then. All right, let's see. We're talking about...
I think this was your graphs. Yeah.
So ask the question again.
So it is, in one slide, you showed a psychic with one prediction who got it right, 100%. But the next slide showed hundreds with one prediction. Can you please clarify the two slides?
Yeah, so I guess they're talking about this one here versus this one. Right. So this is the number of predictions made. If you say, show me what was of all the psychics who made this number of predictions, what was the max percent that anyone got correct? Right. So if you start with the right side, of the few people who made 250 predictions, right? That might be one person. You can't tell from this how many. But say it was 5 people who made 250 predictions, right? That many or more. It has to be that many or more. Of those 5 people, the best any one of those 5 did looks like a little under 10%, right? So if we go to the middle and we say the 50, right? Of all the people who made just 50 predictions, only 50, they didn't go above 50 predictions, then the best that a person in that group did was like 35%. Because the least predictions you make, the more likely one of them is going to get lucky, is basically what it means, right? So of the people, all of the psychics made at least one prediction, and yes, one person in the group got their only one correct. So that's kind of what that means. And then the next slide is just showing how many predictions were made by how many psychics. So in this case, if you go to the far right and you look at, okay, somebody made 250 predictions and it's a very low number. Maybe it was 2 or 3 people, right? If we go into the middle where it says number of prediction made is 25, that means maybe 40 people made that many predictions was their max, right? But if you go to 1, well, how many people made at least one prediction? Well, they all made at least one prediction. Hope that clarifies it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I know of scientists who predicted a big pandemic, but did any psychics predict COVID specifically? Did any of them call the war against Ukraine?
Well, that's interesting. That was, outside of we had stopped the project by then. That would be an interesting one to look into. The pandemic certainly was in our time frame, and no, there's a lot of them retroactively saying they did. Sometimes they just made very vague statements, but no, retroactively. I think Sylvia Brown, people pointed out that she's deceased, but in her book, she said, so I think Ben Radford actually talked about this, that, she claimed that she had gotten it right, but it was really vague, waffly stuff. Interestingly, there's a psychic medium named Thomas John who's now claiming, that he predicted but you can't find anything specific. And in fact, there's negative evidence against that because he was the house show at Caesar's Palace. He started in January of 2020, scheduled out for the entire year, and then had to cancel everything because the pandemic happened. So.
Right. Exactly.
It's quite interesting. Actually, Susan Gerbic wrote an article which was named, I believe they didn't see it coming, and it was all about this. She has screenshots of their websites, that say nothing about it, and then of them having events scheduled all through 2020. And then, oh, we had to cancel this, sorry.
Yep. Most of the leading psychics I used to hear seem to have failed to predict their own deaths.
Sylvia Brown was one who I believed gave a date that was way in the future of when she actually passed.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And who would you say are the most prominent psychics these days? The ones you showed, or are there others?
Well, yeah, the people who make it, to TV tend to be the ones that people would have to say so. I mean, I guess there's people who maybe write articles, and a lot of people who write best-selling books. I don't know those people so well, but the people I'm more aware of are the people who are all over social media because they have TV shows. So Thomas John, Tyler Henry, Teresa Caputo would be in that set of people. Matt Fraser's another one. And interestingly, if you know those people I mentioned, they're all also medium. Well, maybe not Teresa Caputo. I'm not sure about her, but the other ones are all they're mediums too. So that's a weird thing too. It's like not enough to be able to help you by predicting the future, but it's more attention grabbing to speak to someone who's dead and make that your shtick. And the most famous of them are the ones who seem to do that.
Mm-hmm. So what was the criteria that was looked at when selecting the psychics that were featured in this study?
It was just whatever Richard got his hands on in the time that he had to do it. So the goal was to get every published prediction in some sort of Australian media, and then it was extended to an Australian psychic going on YouTube channels or also on radio or TV, as I mentioned. But, couldn't get everybody, but he just got as many as he possibly could. And I don't think I mentioned Richard kept copies of everything. So, if anything was questioned later, he could always go back and say, no, here is the recording, or here is a screen grab of what you had on your website, where I got that from. Or, here is, whatever, a microfiche printout that he got at the public library system. So, he was very good about keeping all the data.
Great. I didn't know the $1 million paranormal challenge was defunct. What happened?
Oh, yeah. So that was from the James Randi Educational Foundation. And at some point, Randi stepped away from it and retired. And I believe that was coincident when that happened. And then, in fact, he died. So, yeah, that wasn't going to be reinstituted. But what happened was the JREF merged with CFI, and CFI bumped up its payment for a successful paranormal challenge to, I think it was 100,000 previously. I'm not positive about that, but they bumped it up to 250,000, as I mentioned. So that's now the largest one in the world.
Okay, great. I'm going to add in a couple questions of mine, and then I know some more are coming into the chat. So what other data collaborations or research projects would you like to see conducted next by skeptical organizations or other entities like CFI?
Well, let me leave out the like CFI part. So there's a lot of grassroots skeptical activists coming up because of social media platforms that they can do this with. And I recently met Abhijit Chandra from India. I met him at CSICon. We had a nice conversation. In fact, he had me on his show talking about this project. And I put the idea in his head to do this in India. Somebody has to lead the project locally. And yeah, India has got a huge number. They call them seers, I believe, there. But yeah, it's hard to believe, but it sounds to me as an outsider like belief in this kind of stuff is even more so in India. And it's more damaging because people, they're told not to use real medicine by these people and to use, all sorts of, homeopathic and other kinds of treatments that don't do anything. And this happened during COVID horribly. So, he and other people like him, hopefully in other countries, will take it upon themselves to try to replicate this kind of a thing and also promote it. Because what we really need to do is try to, get the information of this out there. So the media and whoever could point to it, whenever the story of a psychic being successful comes up, and they could say, yeah, but what about this?
Mm-hmm. Sure. And that leads into a second question I had, which is, how do you think this data could be more widely presented to the public for maximum uptake? In other words, potential use for pre-bunking or inoculation, that type of thing.
I'd say the best hope of that, besides going on radio and TV shows like Happened, but of course, it's got a short shelf life, is Wikipedia, because that's got the long shelf life, right? If this gets recorded in Wikipedia in a reasonable way, such that if someone searches, how accurate are psychic predictions, it pops out. I believe it's on Richard Saunders' page. You could check me on that, Adrian. And I do, I know it was there. I hope it's still there. I'll say it that way, because somebody put it there after these articles were published. And what I saw people do was they made a redirect in Wikipedia. I don't know if you know this, but if you type something into the search bar on Wikipedia, you have to be much more specific to find something than you do in Google. It doesn't have the AI for search that the Google search has. So you have to be pretty right on to find it. But what is allowed in Wikipedia is to have what's called redirect pages. So somebody actually writes a page that says, if someone types this in, show them this page. So someone typed in the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project as a page like that. So if you type that into Wikipedia, you go to the section in which Richard Saunders' page where it's talked about.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Would you like to take a moment to say more about guerrilla skeptics?
Adrian, could you read that part from the page? Am I putting you on the spot? Do you have a microphone live?
Oh, I think I have to let her
unmute.
Let her unmute. Is 1 second, Adrian, okay?
Yeah, so for people watching this in the recording, Adrian Hill, who is a skeptical activist herself and one of the contributors to the Skeptic Zone, is on watching us, and she did check it out for me. She said there's a whole section on Richard's page. All right, so you're not muted. Don't hear you though.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Helps to turn the microphone on.
Thank you, Adrian. So what does it say? What does it say?
It actually is quite long. Do you really want me to read the whole thing?
Summarize. You can summarize.
Summarize. Okay. It just says in 2020, Saunders assembled an international team of skeptics to help him complete a project he had been working on since at least 2018, dubbed the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. It lists a bunch of people that were on the team, including me and you, Rob.
Right.
So we're on the page, and it talks about the goals and some generalities about the types of predictions about natural disasters, kind of like what you did in your presentation. And and it well, that's interesting. It actually talks about the article that I wrote as well.
Cool.
So there you go, and that's basically the whole thing.
All right. So we have to hope that that maintains there, and they're going to have a really good reason to take it off. So at least while guerrilla skeptics are still active, they better have a really good reason to remove that. And I don't see that there would be one, right? Because it's a major project of Richard Saunders, and he's Wikipedia notable and has a page.
Yeah.
So
and it has been published, etc., and talked about a lot.
Yeah. So I don't think that's going anywhere. So yeah, there you go.
Great.
Thank you, Adrian.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Adrian. So I'll finish up with two more, and then we should be wrapping up. And that is, can this project be modeled on a small scale for educational purposes? And I'm thinking here of Bertha Vasquez's work, or perhaps the CFI Young Skeptics.
Well, that's a good idea. I mean, I gave this talk at CSICon, and there were people like that, in attendance. I also wrote a report for Skeptical Inquirer about that happened after I made the slides up regarding how we publicize this, but I talked about it at CSICon, And then I wrote a report about not only my presentation, but I did it in a format where it was a Sunday paper presentations. And I talked about all of those people, including a lot of those people who presented at Sunday papers were educators. So hopefully that's making the rounds.
Excellent. So the last one is from our own Eric Krieg, and this is a good segue into Eric leading us out. Could you make your own ironic prediction on which direction belief in psychics will go in another decade?
You're asking me to play psychic on a thing I was talking about.
Yes.
That's ironic.
Well,
Well,
extrapolation.
unfortunately, if the trend is the way the trend has always been, belief in this is not going to go away. You know, the most we could do as people who understand what's going on here is try to educate people who are looking for the truth. There's always going to be some, unfortunately, large subset of people, and all we can do is push back on that and try to give them information to look at so that reasonable people can make a reasonable decision and not only have the hype about these kinds of things out there.
Thanks very much. And we so much appreciate you not just doing all this work, but sharing it in so many forums, including
Welcome.
ours with a needy world. We look forward to having you in the future, and I'll be interested in what other stuff you do in the future, but I won't try to predict it. And I appreciate all our audience being out here today, and encourage you about a month from now to be with us again for our next online meeting. So best wishes to everyone. May the rest of your day go well.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much, Rob.